Yeah, so my journey, I think it really started in my childhood. And I always tell people I was just obsessed with science and nature and being outside and exploring and always discovering new things. And that kind of collided alongside with my grandfather, who I talk about a lot. He's like my hero. And he was a retired physician. He's 95 now. He just retired his license. But he was always so fascinating to me. He had this aura about him. He was a professional, but really kind and empathetic. And, I loved going to his office, and I loved seeing him actually work and, take care of us, my family, my brothers. And so there was kind of this weird collision, where I didn't know it originally, but I always knew I wanted to help people, and I always knew I wanted to get into science and something in biology and that sort of thing. And so when I really fell into ultimately nursing, it just felt like the most amazing profession of all times, which was like, oh my gosh, I can get paid to help people and apply this art of medicine to them, and becoming a nurse practitioner more so. So that was really the heart of where I came from and what landed me in a position that I never thought I'd be a nurse practitioner in a single day in my life when I was a kid. But being a nurse practitioner now, I can't think of a better profession. So one of the things that was disappointing, I think, was recognizing, number one, my grandfather actually was the first person to tell me don't go into medicine. And he sort of said that facetiously, but he was in a position where big insurance was, becoming just this behemoth that it is today. Big pharma was this behemoth coming through. And you could kind of feel this sense of, it wasn't really the art of medicine. It was more like you're a salesman and you're, just shelling out prescriptions left and right. So I knew really early on that, okay, I definitely don't want to do medicine quite like that. I knew there was a little bit more of a deeper root cause perspective. And so I was really fortunate when I was in undergrad and then even in graduate school. I had these really amazing mentors, physicians and nurse practitioners who were, early on, they were saying, you know what, forget this whole insurance game. Let's move to cash-based clinics. Let's treat patients like we used to back in the olden days and actually have this really amazing relationship. We have longer appointments, and we treat them how we should be treating them, with whatever we feel like is necessary to help them actually become better. And so a lot of that was what led me actually to hormone replacement therapy, because again, it can get really, really murky in the world of holistic medicine and functional medicine. We're, trying to do all these different tests. Some of them are helpful, some of them not. How many supplements do we give people? How do you out diet all these problems in modern America and in our environment? And hormone replacement therapy always stood out as this really like shining light, which was, we had all this amazing evidence behind it, clinically speaking, and in the literature. It was something that was, you could kind of grasp, you could kind of take hold of. It was objective and subjective, meaning we could tell when someone was really deficient in hormones, and we could apply those hormones and watch their, levels change in their blood work, but also see them change as human beings. So I always felt like HRT was this kind of, again, shining light in a world of a lot of murky water. And it was something that we could apply broadly to so many people and have this really unbelievable change. Biggest challenges, I think, as a provider that I had to overcome right away was letting go of this idea and this notion that somehow I was doing something wrong. Somehow, the medical board or the pharmacy board was going to come down on me because I was giving people hormones, that my peers would make fun of me and all these sorts of things. There was a lot of pressure to not go against the grain, and there still is to this day. I think there's less of it today, and I think that's amazing. But when I first started out, it was extremely daunting. HRT and TRT to this day are still, they've got quite a bit of stigma against them. But now we're hearing about Oprah talking about them openly and how she's, benefited so greatly from that. Back then it was very hidden. It was very subliminal in a lot of ways. And so when I started my practice, what I came in with was this intention of, I know what I'm doing is meaningful and purposeful. I know by the evidence that it's effective and that it's safe. And at the end of the day, I felt so much better. When my head hit the pillow, I knew I was doing something really, really meaningful for that patient and really safe. And it was much better than giving them some of these, antidepressants and psych meds and all these different things that we apply to patients, and not disparaging those medications, but that we just apply to patients, unfortunately, in the wrong context. A lot of times, hormone replacement therapy and TRT, I think, is the answer for so many things. And so when I suddenly started to change my perspective, a lot of us would kind of think of that as your cognitive bias, right? This idea that we have to do things this way. And then when you kind of consider why we have to do things those certain ways, all of a sudden it's like it doesn't hold water anymore. I was told that because my mentor was told that because he was taught that in university. That's just the end of it. And when I started really saying, you know what, I need to start breaking some of these chains a little bit, metaphorically speaking, of course, but I need to start recognizing that I have these really strong cognitive biases that I don't even know half the time where I got them. And when I start reconsidering all the magical mysteries of hormone replacement therapy, all of a sudden when we start looking at the literature, it's not so magical and mysterious at all. And so it really allowed me to blossom, you know what I mean? Like really take my clinic and grow and not feel afraid and not feel so concerned. I think some of the earliest wins that I had, and I think they're fairly obvious, were the fact that so many of these patients that were coming to me were having these really tremendous and life-changing outcomes. Something I talk about a lot is this idea of self-actualization, which goes back to this idea that Maslow, who is this amazing behavioral psychologist, created this kind of pyramid, if you will, of needs. And at the bottom of the pyramid is this foundational stuff, being able to breathe, being able to sleep, having a roof over your head, all these things that we absolutely have to have in order to live life as a human being. And at the very top of that pyramid is something called self-actualization. And the idea is you can't actually reach self-actualization if you're hungry and starving, if you're overweight, if you're fatigued, if you don't have a roof over your head. And I think hormones are literally like, if there is a true foundation of that pyramid, I think hormones sit at the very bottom of that. I think without hormones, these amazing, more or less kind of chemical messengers of our bodies that direct energy and flow and frequency and all these, it sounds like chakra and crystal stuff, but it's really real. Without those things, it's so hard for people to reach that pinnacle of self-actualization. And we, try applying all these different polypharmacy substances and just, it never seems to, it in fact seems to always get worse. And so all of a sudden we started, really applying hormone replacement therapy and seeing these tremendous results. And what I really started seeing was patients reach this pinnacle of self-actualization, reach a point in which they could say, hey, you know what? I've always wanted to start a business and I never had it in me. I didn't have the energy. I didn't have the confidence. I didn't have the, mental wherewithal to take that on. And since I've started hormone replacement therapy or testosterone replacement therapy, this is like a reality for me now. And that was way, way, way more meaningful of a win than anything I'd ever come across in my life. So much so that it was just clear, like, okay, we have to put all our eggs in this basket to some degree, and then even be able to teach this stuff. Like, how can I get other providers who probably similar to me, they didn't grow up learning this stuff. We weren't told that this was an okay thing. How can we then shift this from not only patient wins, but also provider wins too? I think a couple things stood out to me right away in terms of, now I'm treating patients as a provider, but I'm doing it in a way that to me is so meaningful and gratifying. I'm making money, which is excellent. I mean, I think a lot of people think that's silly, but I mean, making a good living and supporting yourself and your family is unbelievable. So not only am I living out my dream of being a nurse practitioner and helping others, I'm making great money. The patients are happy to provide that to me. I don't remember who said it, but dollar bills are just basically applause from your people, right? And so that to me meant so much. And so what really started becoming obvious was, number one, I'm just me. I'm just one person. I'm a small fish in a great big ocean. And there's so many people who need this type of help. As a provider, you can be licensed in X amount of states. It's kind of challenging to be licensed in all 50. And I can't see what could be thousands, millions of patients who across the nation need this type of help, and they're asking for it. I mean, I literally would have patients calling me from Florida, California, New York. Hey, a friend of mine sees you. I would love it if you could see me. And I couldn't, literally. And I was just super fortunate to even be offered that opportunity. But, I started finding networks of people who potentially could, but a lot of providers just frankly, they just didn't feel confident in hormone replacement therapy. And so even in my world, in my universe of hormone replacement therapy and functional medicine and those sorts of things, there were still providers who were tentative to provide this stuff to patients. It felt, again, still they had that cognitive bias where it was kind of trapping them from taking the next step into hormone replacement therapy. And so I wanted to be able to bridge that gap, help providers overcome that barrier. And so what became obvious to me again was, okay, not only can I not help everybody, of course, and not only can I not serve everybody, but I need to be able to spread this message, not just to my patients, but to other providers, and also help them in a lot of ways out of that cognitive bias and into a place where they feel confident and assured with themselves. I would argue that a lot of providers, again, I talk about this cognitive bias so often because it is such first of all, most of us don't recognize it. It's, again, not something that's clearly obvious or apparent to us. It is just something that we've gone through school. We've assumed that the professors that we met, the mentors that we've had have all been trained, at these prestigious universities, and they know what they're talking about. They've probably written some papers and whatnot. We all just, again, assume that what the information that they have is 110% correct, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, which gives us a lot of confidence. Ironically, I think a lot of providers are somewhat jaded in that sense. We hear about, and I know this is applied to physicians, but frankly, we see this across all medical providers, this God complex, right? This idea that I am the freaking man or the freaking woman and I know everything. And look, I get it to some degree. If you're a neurosurgeon operating on someone's brain, that's one thing. But, at the end of the day, it's always best, in my opinion, to have that humility and that grace about you where you recognize that things change all the time and there's new information, and these are just ideas. They're liquid in a lot of ways. And as we grow to learn and understand more and more and more, we can recognize that, hey, there are things in the past that made more sense than some of the things we're doing now, here in the present. And potentially there are things in the future that are going to be even more impactful. Being able to recognize that things change and it's okay. And it's okay to admit those things. You're not wrong. Things are just changing. So I think hormone replacement therapy kind of lands in that weird world where, frankly, for decades, we've known that it's super helpful and beneficial. And all these studies are saying one thing. And yet currently in today's present tense, they're kind of seen as almost this antiquated, old, dangerous therapy that people really shouldn't be using or even contemplating. And it couldn't be further from the truth. So the other side of the coin in a lot of ways is then also getting, again, providers to let their guards down a little bit. Have that open mind. And it's not so much that they have to, completely attempt to let go of every single thing they've ever learned and hoped and dreamed for in modern medicine, because there's a lot of important things that we learn, but more so having that, almost like childlike wonderment and curiosity. And that's why I always talk about my childhood, because I think it's actually fun. Again, it's fun to be a provider and know that you don't know everything and have that goal to learn as much as you possibly can to help others, right? As long as we're providing great value and service unto others, I truly don't think there's a way we could lose in this game. And so it's again encouraging providers to go back to, we call it the art of medicine for a reason, because there is something about it that's creative and interesting. And, every single person that you're going to touch and hold dear to you and as patients, they're all individuals and they have very unique needs and concerns and problems. And so it's a real gift to be able to be a provider through that lens and treat people, because otherwise, if you're treating it through what I think is conventional medicine right now, it's depressing. And, we see the highest suicide rates right now amongst physicians, amongst most professions, because they're in these golden handcuffs. They're getting paid so much money, and yet their patients are largely getting worse. They're feeling worse. They can't treat them the way they most of the time want to. And a lot of the stuff that they learned, it doesn't even hold water anymore. And the same goes for nurse practitioners as well. Success to me is, I guess it's probably different from maybe most people's versions of success. I have always truly felt in my life that I've had success on my side. And I ground that in this sense of, and I just recently said it, but providing great value and service to others is, I think that is what we're here to do as human beings. I really do. And I have maybe some spiritual or religious connotations to that, but I truly think that God put us here on this earth to provide great service and value to others. I think money is an interesting thing. I think a lot of times people get annoyed by money. Money is the root of all evil, and it's not really money so much as the greed behind the money, right? We can be greedy in a lot of different ways, and I think that's where a lot of medical providers also miss the mark. They feel ashamed to make money. Arguably, it's funny, they didn't feel that way when they were in the insurance model. They're getting money somehow, but all of a sudden when a patient is handing you cash or a credit card or something like that, or a debit card, you just have this sense of guilt. So success for me has really been a transformation of, again, how do I wrap my mind around providing great service and value to others, but also not feel ashamed to make a good living and create a clinic of my dreams and be able to spend lots of time with my family. That's of course a cornerstone of success for me, is not only how can I be the best possible provider to my patients, how can I be the best educator to my students, but also how can I be the best father and the best husband, and how can I show up in multiple areas of my life as arguably the same person that I am in a lot of different respects. And I think success breeds this sense of wanting more. I think that, I don't know, the grind and hustle culture today is interesting. I think that's super important. But I think that success is really, at the end of the day, a sense of grace and fulfillment, not a sense of entitlement and greed. I think that's where things go off for a lot of people. So again, I think in my early days, success was literally, just, hey, oh my gosh, like I've got 50 patients in my clinic. How amazing is that? I'm so grateful for that, and I'm humbled by that. Success now is, oh my gosh, 200 something odd students have purchased the course, and they're messaging me saying it's amazing, and they're helping change their patients' lives. That to me is where the real wins happen, and I think that's where success lies for me today. So for someone just starting out, whatever clinic you have, whether it's a classical wellness clinic where you're offering multiple services, maybe it's just HRT, maybe it's a mixture of aesthetics and whatnot. If you are providing HRT, I think what a lot of providers are fearful of is, oh my gosh, this industry is going to be saturated. We get this sense that, we've missed out. There's no way I can make money off this now, and that just couldn't be further from the truth. Again, it's probably another huge cognitive bias that we have, but there are literally millions and millions of people who need HRT right this moment. There's not enough clinics in the world, literally, that could take care of all these people. And by the way, that number is just growing exponentially. Again, if you take the course, you'll know I say HRT is for everybody. It's no longer just for little old ladies who are in menopause, and God love those ladies. It's not only for little old men who need a little bit of testosterone to get their pep up during the day. It's for young and old. It's for women who are suffering from PCOS. It's for men who are suffering from, debilitating depression and anxiety. I believe hormones have a place. So in fact, this market is not only expanding, it's expanding rapidly. So rapidly that seriously, we need your help. Like seriously, we need you to step into this space and not feel scared about it. I think that the industry at large, what we're going to see, what I'm hopeful for, is that HRT becomes a cornerstone. It becomes literally, like we talked about, the foundation of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, of the pyramid. It is going to be the foundation there. And you cannot be a medical provider without having really unbelievable knowledge and expertise in hormone replacement therapy. And I'm talking from a primary care doc or NP to a cardiologist to a psychiatrist. We're going to see a lot of conventional medicine do away with the things that, we thought made a lot of sense and held water, and they didn't. And I think hormone replacement therapy is really going to be the thing that, if you want to seriously get in as soon as possible, to be that strong voice and that strong provider in your community, I think HRT is the most logical thing to get into and to start serving people right away. The idea of having a legacy is sort of new to me, and I don't know if that's just a generational thing. I remember my grandfather always talking about his legacy a lot, and my dad less so. And by the time it came to me, I used to think, oh, for God's sakes, who cares about my legacy? I'm Nico Misleh. I'll be here today, gone tomorrow. I think my whole worldview has shifted on that front. I think everybody should be concerned about their legacy. And I don't need it to mean it to be like a legacy of, Alexander the Great or something like that. I mean, a legacy that you're proud of and that your family members, even over the next 100 years, they're just happy to know that you were here on this earth doing something amazing and leaving behind something. So, I'm very concerned about my legacy, and I hope and I pray every single day that the legacy I leave behind is one of hope, is one of guidance, one of something tangible that providers can look back on, hopefully in the future, and say, "Gosh, I'm so glad that I ran into Nico Misleh, and I'm so glad that we developed a relationship, and I'm so glad that I can treat patients this way and look through this different lens that I thought was totally unrealistic or unachievable or whatever it was." And I hope that via osmosis, hundreds, thousands, I hope millions of patients, and not just in the US, but across the world, in some way, shape, or form, have been impacted indirectly through me. And I always say this, and again, I'm not here to be political or religious necessarily, but I truly think that my purpose was God put me here on this earth to do this task. And I'm literally living vicariously through him. And I hope that impact in some way, shape, or form is a way for him to touch other people, where there's just no way Nico Misleh by himself could ever do something like that.